The night the vampire king found her. Silence ruled the 47th floor. At this hour, the Wentworth Grand Hotel belonged only to shadows, security cameras, and the man who owned them all. The city below glowed like scattered diamonds, but up here, the corridors were dim and silent. No guest knew this floor existed. No booking system listed it. No elevator button could summon it without a coded keycard possessed by only a handful of people in the world. And yet, someone was inside his private suite. When Silas Wentworth pushed open the door at 2:43 a.m., he knew immediately. The scent reached him first. Not perfume, not fear, not blood. Laundry soap, fresh linen, cleaning chemicals, human. He stepped inside without turning on the lights. Silas never rushed. Centuries had erased urgency from his nature. Patience had kept him alive longer than empires. The moonlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated the bed. And the woman sleeping in it? He stopped. For a long moment, the immortal king of the Eastern Vampire Court simply stood in the doorway, coat still draped over his shoulders, and stared. She was curled tightly under the white sheets, as if trying to make herself smaller than the world. Dark hair spread across the pillow. Her hands clutched the blanket even in sleep, knuckles pale from the tension. She did not belong here. Every instinct he possessed, ancient, predatory, unyielding, told him this was wrong. No human could reach this floor. No one entered his suite without permission. No one survived it if they did. Yet here she was, alive, sleeping, sick. Silas closed the door behind him without a sound. He moved through the suite like a shadow crossing deeper shadow, every step silent on the marble floor. Years of moving through battlefields and enemy strongholds had taught him how to walk without announcing his presence. Still she did not wake. When he reached the foot of the bed, the moonlight revealed what the darkness had hidden. A bruise marked her jaw. Fresh, purple blooming into yellow at the edges. Another bruise colored her wrist, faint beneath the sleeve of the hotel housekeeping uniform folded neatly on the chair beside the bed. Her shoes were placed perfectly below it. Careful, respectful, grateful. Like someone who believed she was trespassing in paradise. Silas did not feel anger. He felt something far more dangerous. Curiosity. He sat in the armchair across from the bed and waited. Vampires understood patience better than any creature alive. Time did not chase them, they chased time. 17 minutes passed before she woke. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding them as consciousness returned. For a brief second she looked peaceful, a rare, fragile thing. Then she saw him. She jolted upright so quickly the sheets tangled around her legs. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to fall asleep, I just I swear I was going to leave before. Breathe. His voice was calm. Oh, not a command. An offering. She froze mid-panic, chest rising and falling too fast. Her gaze darted toward the door, calculating distance, escape routes, consequences. Silas recognized the behavior instantly. He had seen it in soldiers after war. In prisoners after captivity. In humans who expected pain to follow every mistake. I know who you are, she whispered. This is your suite. I shouldn't be here. I'll go. I'll go right now. Please don't fire me. I need this job. Silas tilted his head slightly. How did you get in? The question clearly startled her. She had prepared for anger, not curiosity. There's a service corridor behind the east staircase, she said quietly. The lock's been broken for months. It leads to maintenance access behind the kitchen. I found it by accident. Silas filed the information away for later. Someone would answer for that oversight tomorrow. But not tonight. Are you all right? The question hung between them like fragile glass. She blinked. What? You've been crying for hours. The bruise on your jaw is recent. You didn't have it at the start of your shift. Her hand rose unconsciously to cover it. I'm fine. That is not what I asked. Silence filled the room. She stared at him as though no one had ever asked that question before. Finally she whispered, It's been a long night. He leaned forward slightly. Do you need help? The word struck her harder than any threat could have. Why would you help me? Silas considered the question. I am tired of pretending I don't see things. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears she refused to let fall. I should go home. The word home sounded like something heavy and sharp in her mouth. Are you married? Her hands froze on the buttons of her blouse. Yes. Does your husband know where you are? A long pause. No. And if you aren't there when he returns? A bitter laugh escaped her. Then I'd better have a good excuse. Silas stood and walked to the window bar. He poured a glass of water and placed it on the bedside table. Close enough to reach, far enough to not threaten. Drink before you leave. You're dehydrated. Her hand trembled as she accepted it. 3 days passed before he saw her again. 3 days of meetings, politics, negotiations, and the endless machinery of an empire that existed both in the human world and far beneath it. Silas Wentworth was the public owner of the Wentworth Hotel chain. But that was only the surface. Beneath the polished facade, he ruled an ancient vampire court older than the country itself. Power recognized power, and the supernatural world had bowed to the Wentworth bloodline for generations. Yet in all his centuries, he had never found himself thinking about a human maid. Until now. Her file appeared on his desk the next morning. Elena Reyes, 23. Employed 18 months. Promoted quickly. Perfect performance reviews. Never late. Never absent. Emergency contact. Daniel Reyes. Husband. Silas requested a background check. The results arrived 6 hours later. Daniel Reyes was clean on paper. Sales representative. Stable job. Gym membership. Expensive car lease. No police reports. But the past had shadows. 3 former girlfriends. 2 refused to speak. The third whispered for 40 minutes before hanging up. When the call ended, Silas stared out at the city for a long time. The next time he saw Elena, she was sitting in a blind spot of the basement corridor cameras, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. You found the blind spot. She jumped, then sighed when she recognized him. There are blind spots everywhere if you look hard enough. May I sit? The question confused her again. Yes. They sat several feet apart on overturned supply crates. You haven't slept. Neither have you. True. Silence settled between them. I'm married, she said finally. He isn't a bad person. He just has a temper. And what is the difference? He loves me. Her voice cracked. Silas watched her quietly. Love should not leave bruises. The words shattered something inside her. For the first time, tears fell. And for the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt the beginning of something he could not name. Not hunger. Not curiosity. Not power. Something far more dangerous. Hope. The war inside Silas Wentworth had begun. And he had no idea it would change both their destinies forever. The king who chose to watch then chose to move. Silas Wentworth did not believe in coincidences. Not after living long enough to watch kingdoms rise and fall, not after surviving centuries where every accident was usually someone else's knife in disguise. So when Elena Reyes appeared again in the hotel's blind spots, first the basement corridor, then the forgotten lounge on floor 12, Silas didn't tell himself it was fate. He told himself it was a pattern. And patterns meant danger. But danger wasn't always aimed at him. Some dangers wore wedding rings. Some dangers smiled in public and broke you in private. Elena didn't return to his suite again. She was too smart for that. She learned quickly which places weren't watched, which doors had locks that never latched properly, which stairwells echoed less, which corners smelled like cleaning supplies and loneliness instead of security and wealth. She didn't speak much either. Not at first. The first few nights, Silas simply saw her. Sitting on the old couch in the employees' lounge, still in uniform, shoes off, hands wrapped around a paper cup of water like she didn't trust herself to hold anything breakable. Sometimes her eyes were swollen. Sometimes her sleeves were pulled down too far, even in warmth. Sometimes she stared at the wall as if her mind had locked itself behind a door she couldn't open. And Silas, vampire king, corporate titan, predator in a tailored suit, sat across the room without approaching. He didn't trap her. He didn't demand answers. He only made sure she had silence. A place to breathe. Because one truth was carved into him deeper than immortality. People who were hunted couldn't heal while they were being chased. On the 4th night, Elena finally spoke first. You're going to fire me? Silas didn't look up from the ledger in his hand. He wasn't really reading it. No. She swallowed. You're going to call security. No. You're going to tell someone. Silas closed the ledger, slow and deliberate. Who would I tell? She stared at him like she couldn't decide whether that was kindness or cruelty. Anyone, she whispered.
I can't
Someone
do
important.
This anymore.
Someone with power.
Tell
Silas's
me it's
mouth
going to be
twitched.
okay.
Not a smile, not quite. You think I don't have power? Elena's shoulders tensed. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, he said quietly. You meant someone who would listen. She exhaled shakily. Then, before she could stop herself, the truth leaked out of her like blood from a hidden wound. No one listens to people like me. Silas's gaze sharpened. How long have you worked here? 1.5 years. And in that time, how many times has anyone asked if you were safe? Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Silas nodded once, as if her silence was the answer he expected. You said you found the service corridor by accident. Yes. And you found the blind spots too. Her jaw tightened. I'm not stealing. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just surviving, Silas finished. That word hit her hard. She looked down, fingers twisting. No one had ever named it that cleanly. Surviving. Not being dramatic. Not being weak. Not being too sensitive. Surviving. Silas leaned back, giving her space. I had someone check the corridor behind the east staircase, he said casually, as if discussing plumbing. It will be repaired tomorrow. Elena's head snapped up, panic flashing. No, please don't. Silas held up one hand, calm. I said it will be repaired. Not sealed. Her brow furrowed. He met her eyes, voice like velvet over steel. It will still open for you. Elena stared at him. Why? Silas didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was dangerous. The truth was that he'd memorized her pattern of footsteps. The truth was that he could smell her fear before he saw her. The truth was that his ancient instincts kept reacting to her pain in ways that made no sense for a king.
Here,
so he gave her
this.
something safer.
I don't know if I can.
Because broken
Just a
locks
little.
are invitations to worse people. He watched her swallow. And because if you need a place to breathe, he added softly, you should not have to risk being hunted to find it. Elena's eyes shimmered. She blinked fast, refusing tears. You don't even know me. Silas's gaze darkened. I know bruises, he said. And for the first time, Elena didn't argue. The next day, Silas moved. Not like a man. Like a king. But never loudly. Never recklessly. Silas didn't crush enemies with fists. He dismantled them with systems. And Daniel Reyes lived inside systems. Money, reputation, employment, image. Men like Daniel built their entire identity on appearing untouchable. Silas preferred to make men like that collapse without understanding why the ground had vanished beneath them. He called his head of security first. Not to report Elena. To protect her. I want the camera rotation logs for every staff corridor, Silas said. I want blind spots eliminated. The security chief hesitated. That will cost. Silas's voice became colder. Then spend. Pause. Yes, sir. Silas continued. I want a private list. Any employee with repeated injuries. Any patterns. Any staff who linger in off-limits areas after hours. The security chief swallowed. That sounds like surveillance. Silas's gaze sharpened like a blade. It's called noticing, he said. And it's overdue. That evening he requested Elena's supervisor, Marla Hensley, to his office. Marla arrived nervous, shoulders stiff. She was one of those managers who smiled in front of guests and snarled in back hallways. Mr. Wentworth, she said too brightly. This is unexpected. Sit, Silas said. She sat. Silas folded his hands.
It's gonna be okay.
Tell me about Elena
Can we be
Reyes.
sure?
Marla's
We'll face
face
it
shifted.
together.
Oh, Elena's fine. Quiet girl. Works hard. Sometimes a little emotional. But we manage. Silas watched her carefully. Emotional. Marla laughed awkwardly. You know how some girls are. Personal problems. Husband problems. It affects their work sometimes. Silas's voice stayed calm, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. And how do you manage her? Marla shrugged. We remind her that no one's forcing her to stay. Jobs are replaceable. Silas leaned forward slightly. Do you enjoy speaking to your staff that way? Marla stiffened. Sir, Silas cut in, quiet as nightfall. From now on, Elena Reyes is not to be spoken to harshly. Not by you. Not by anyone. Marla blinked. Sir, are you? Silas held her gaze until her breath shortened. This is not a discussion, he said. If I find out you've threatened, belittled, or publicly humiliated her, you will be dismissed. Marla nodded too quickly. Of course. Absolutely. Silas didn't stop there. And Marla, he added softly, if you know she is being hurt outside of work, and you continue to look away, you will be dismissed. Marla's face went pale. I don't. Silas's tone stayed smooth. You didn't ask. That is the point. Marla left trembling. Silas watched the door close, then exhaled slowly. Because this wasn't only about Elena. This was about a sickness that lived in human society, a willingness to ignore pain if it was inconvenient. Silas hated that sickness. He had once ruled humans through terror. Now he ruled them through order. And order meant accountability. That night, Elena appeared in the floor 12 lounge again. But she was different. Her shoulders were still tense, but her eyes weren't empty. She looked wary, like someone who had sensed something shifting around her. Silas was already there. He didn't speak first. He never forced her. Elena sat carefully on the far end of the couch. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "Marla didn't yell at me today." Silas's expression remained neutral. "Good." Elena stared at him. "She didn't even look at me like I was dirt. She acted scared." Silas remained still. Elena's voice sharpened. "Did you do something?" Silas's gaze met hers. "I spoke to her." Elena's eyes widened. "You shouldn't have." Silas blinked once. "Why?" "Because it'll get worse at home," Elena whispered, panic rising. "If he senses I'm being protected, if he feels like he's losing control." Silas's jaw tightened. "Control?" he echoed. Elena hugged herself, voice breaking. "He doesn't hit me because he hates me," she said desperately. "He hits me because he thinks he has to. Because he thinks I belong to him." Silas's eyes darkened, ancient hunger flaring, not for blood, but for retribution. "You are not property," he said quietly. Elena laughed, bitter and exhausted. "You don't know how it works." Silas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, giving her his full attention. "Tell me," he said. Elena stared at him like she'd never been allowed to speak the truth out loud. Then slowly the story spilled. Daniel had been charming, protective, funny. He'd rescued her from eviction when she was 19, paid her late rent, bought groceries, told her she was special. He'd called her his miracle. He'd made her feel chosen. And then gradually he'd started slicing away her world. He didn't like her friends. He didn't like her family. He didn't like her wearing certain clothes. He didn't like her laughing too loudly. He didn't like her sleeping too deeply. He didn't like her existing without asking permission. "And if I fight back," Elena whispered, voice shaking, "he cries. He says I'm breaking him. He says he'll change. He says he needs me." Silas listened without interruption. When she finished, she looked like she expected judgment. Instead, Silas said softly, "He trained you." Elena flinched. Silas continued, voice calm. "He trained you to confuse fear with love, pain with loyalty, control with protection." Elena's eyes filled again. "I feel stupid." Silas's gaze softened, only slightly. "You are not stupid," he said. "You are trapped." Elena's lips trembled. "And traps can be opened," he added. She stared at him, hope and terror colliding in her face. "How?" she whispered. Silas's eyes glinted in the low light. "Slowly," he said. "Safely. In a way that makes him unable to hurt you again." Elena swallowed hard. "I can't leave," she whispered. "I don't have money. I don't have family who'll take me. I don't have." Silas's voice cut through like a promise. "You have options." Elena's breath hitched. He continued, careful. "I am not asking you to trust me tonight," he said. "I am asking you to consider one truth." She waited. Silas's eyes locked onto hers. "You deserve to live without fear." The words were so simple, so clean that Elena's face crumpled. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking silently. Silas didn't touch her. He didn't move toward her. He simply stayed. A quiet presence. A king who refused to demand anything from her. And that, more than money, more than power, was what shattered the strongest wall inside Elena. Because the most frightening thing about kindness when you've been abused is that it feels unreal. Feels like a trap. But Silas's kindness had no hooks. And that made it terrifying. Later that night, Elena stood to leave. Silas rose as well, keeping distance. "Will you be safe going home?" he asked. Elena hesitated. Then she forced a smile that looked like pain. "I'll be fine," she lied automatically. Silas didn't argue. He simply nodded once as if accepting her survival instinct. But as she reached the door, Silas spoke again. "Elena." She paused. He held out a small card. No name. No logo. Just a number. "My private line," he said. "If you need help, real help, call." Elena stared at it like it was dangerous. It was. Because if Daniel found it. Her hands shook as she took it anyway. "And Elena," Silas added quietly, voice lowering, "if he leaves another bruise on you." Elena's eyes widened. Silas's gaze turned colder, something ancient. "I will act." Elena swallowed, voice barely audible. "You're already acting." Silas watched her carefully. "Not yet," he said. And the way he said it made her shiver. Because for the first time, Elena realized something. The man in front of her wasn't just a billionaire hotel owner. There was something in his eyes that didn't belong to humanity. Something old. Something powerful. Something that had been sleeping for a long time. Until she climbed into his bed by accident. Elena left. Silas stood alone in the lounge, listening to the building breathe. Then, in the quiet, he pulled out his phone and made a single call. "Find me Daniel Reyes," he said. His voice was calm. But it carried the weight of an executioner. And this time, "I want everything." Because the king had watched long enough. And the next step would not be gentle.
It was an
The
accident,
night the king
I swear.
stopped waiting.
An accident?
By the
Look at
time
this
the sun
mess.
set the
Please
next
stop.
evening, Silas Wentworth knew more about Daniel Reyes than the man knew about himself. Centuries of ruling had taught him one simple truth. Monsters rarely believed they were monsters. They believed they were justified. Daniel Reyes believed he was justified. He believed he was stressed, overworked, misunderstood. A good man pushed too far by an emotional wife who didn't appreciate everything he did for her. Silas read the report in silence. Financial debt carefully hidden behind credit cards. Missed payments disguised by refinances. Gambling apps installed, deleted, then reinstalled. Small lies repeated until they became truth in Daniel's own mind. And then there were the patterns. Neighbors who had heard shouting through thin apartment walls. A former girlfriend who had moved states overnight and changed her last name. A bartender who remembered a woman crying in the bathroom while Daniel laughed with friends. No police reports. No charges. No official record. Daniel Reyes knew exactly how far he could push without consequences. Men like that always did. Silas closed the file slowly. His reflection stared back from the dark glass of the office windows, pale, composed, eyes older than the city below. For centuries he had enforced laws among vampires. Tonight he would enforce something older. Justice. Elena arrived at work late the next morning. Not dramatically late. Just enough for a supervisor to notice. Just enough to trigger a warning. She moved through the corridors quietly, pushing her cleaning cart, greeting guests with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. Silas watched from the mezzanine balcony above the lobby. Humans walked below him in expensive shoes and expensive problems. And among them moved the woman who had unknowingly woken something inside an immortal king. She paused at the front desk to collect fresh linens. As she reached upward, her sleeve slid back. A new bruise bloomed along her forearm. Silas didn't move. He didn't react. But the temperature around him dropped 2 degrees. The receptionist shivered without knowing why. Silas turned and walked away. That night, Elena did not go to the employee lounge. She did not go to the basement corridor. She did not search for blind spots. She went home. And Silas followed. Not in a car. Not on foot. He followed the way predators had followed prey long before cars existed. From rooftops, from shadows, from the silent pathways above the city where no human eyes ever looked. The apartment complex was modest. Aging brick. Flickering hallway lights. A broken security camera hanging uselessly by exposed wires. Silas landed silently on the roof and listened. Human buildings were loud if you knew how to hear them. Water running through pipes. Televisions murmuring. Footsteps shifting weight across floors. And from one apartment. Shouting. A man's voice. Sharp. Angry. Frustrated. A woman's voice. Softer. Pleading. Exhausted. Silas stood perfectly still in the darkness. He had promised Elena he would move slowly. He had promised safety. But promises had limits. Then came the sound that snapped the last thread of restraint. A crash. Followed by silence. Then a quiet, broken sob. The world tilted. For centuries, Silas had controlled his instincts. Ruled them. Buried them beneath diplomacy and contracts and careful power. But vampires were not created to tolerate cruelty. They were created to end it. The window lock snapped like brittle glass beneath his hand. He stepped inside without a sound. The apartment smelled like cheap beer, fear, and shattered glass. Daniel Reyes stood in the living room, breathing heavily, hands still raised from the strike he had just delivered. Elena sat on the floor beside the couch, hand pressed to her cheek, eyes wide with shock more than pain. Neither of them saw Silas yet. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Look what you made me do," he muttered. "Why do you make everything so hard?" Elena's voice trembled. "I didn't do anything." "You never listen," he snapped. Silas stepped forward. "I believe she does." The words fell into the room like a blade. Daniel spun around. Confusion flashed first. Then irritation. Then anger. "Who the hell are you?" Silas didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at him. And Daniel felt it. That ancient, suffocating weight of a predator's attention. It pressed down on his chest until his breath shortened. "I asked you a question," Daniel said louder, bravado rising to hide the fear creeping in. Silas spoke calmly. "My name is Silas Wentworth." Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. Hotel advertisements. Magazine covers. Business news. "Why are you in my apartment?" Daniel demanded. Silas's gaze slid to Elena. She stared at him in horror, shaking her head slightly. "Don't." The silent plea was clear. But Silas had never obeyed fear. He returned his attention to Daniel. "I came to see the man who believes love leaves bruises." Daniel laughed sharply. "Whatever she told you." "She told me very little," Silas interrupted. "Your actions told me the rest." Daniel's expression hardened. "This is none of your business." Silas tilted his head. "You made it my business the moment you chose violence over control." Daniel stepped closer, puffing his chest. "You think you can just walk into my home and threaten me?" Silas didn't move. "Threaten?" he repeated softly. Daniel sneered. "You're rich. Good for you. That doesn't give you the right." Silas moved. Daniel never saw it. 1 second the billionaire stood across the room. The next, his hand gripped Daniel's throat, lifting him effortlessly off the floor. Daniel's feet kicked uselessly in the air, eyes wide with terror. Elena gasped. "Silas, no." Silas's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for Daniel. "You mistake restraint for weakness." Daniel clawed at his wrist, gasping. Silas's eyes darkened. No longer human, no longer pretending. "You hurt what you believe belongs to you," he said quietly. "You hide behind apologies. Behind tears. Behind promises you never intend to keep." Daniel's face reddened, panic replacing anger. Silas leaned closer. "You are finished." He released him. Daniel collapsed to the floor, coughing violently. Elena scrambled backward, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" she whispered, terrified. Silas turned to her slowly. "I am ending this." Daniel staggered to his feet. "You can't just, you think you can ruin my life because she cried to you?" Silas's gaze sharpened. "I do not need to ruin your life," he said calmly. "You have done that yourself." Daniel scoffed. "You have no proof of anything." Silas pulled a folded document from his coat and dropped it on the table. Bank statements. Debt reports. Workplace complaints. Witness testimonies. Daniel's face drained of color as he scanned the pages. You can't. Your employer will receive a copy tomorrow," Silas continued. "Along with evidence of your harassment of clients. Your falsified reports. Your financial misconduct." Daniel's hands shook. "You're bluffing." Silas stepped closer. "I have lived long enough to lose interest in bluffing." Daniel's voice cracked. "You can't destroy my career over a marital argument." Silas's eyes flashed cold. "You destroyed your career the moment you decided violence was acceptable." Silence fell. Heavy. Crushing. Then Silas turned to Elena. "Pack a bag." She stared at him. "What?" "You are leaving." Fear flooded her face. "I can't just walk out." "Yes," Silas said gently. "You can." Daniel laughed hysterically. "She's not going anywhere." Silas didn't even look at him. "Elena," he said softly, voice steady and calm, "you asked me how traps are opened." Her breath shook. "This is how." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm scared." Silas stepped closer but stopped at a respectful distance. "I know," he said quietly. "But you will not be alone anymore." For a long moment, Elena stood frozen between two worlds. The life she knew. And the life she had never believed she deserved. Then, with trembling hands, she turned and walked toward the bedroom. Daniel shouted behind her. Threats. Pleas. Promises. None of them reached her. For the first time in years she was walking toward freedom. And for the first time in centuries, Silas felt something inside his chest loosen. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Relief. Because protecting her was no longer a possibility. It was now a promise. The girl who changed the king. Elena packed faster than she thought possible. Not because she was brave. Because if she slowed down, she might lose the courage she had just borrowed from a man who looked like calm but felt like a storm. Her hands shook as she opened drawers. Most of her belongings fit into one small suitcase. Clothes folded too many times. Books worn at the edges. A framed photo of her mother that she wrapped carefully in a sweater. Every item whispered the same thing. You stayed too long. Behind her, Daniel paced the living room like a trapped animal, muttering, bargaining, threatening, begging in waves that rose and fell with his panic. Elena, don't do this. You're overreacting. We can fix this. You know I love you. She paused at the bedroom door, gripping the suitcase handle until her knuckles turned white. Once, those words had been everything she needed to hear. Now they felt like chains. She stepped back into the living room. Silas stood by the window, motionless and silent, giving her space the way he always did. Not pushing. Not demanding. Just there. Elena stopped beside the door. Daniel saw the suitcase and his face crumpled. You're really leaving? His voice sounded small. Afraid. Almost childlike. For a moment Elena's heart twisted. Because the hardest part about leaving someone abusive was remembering they were human. Remembering the good memories. Remembering the version of them you fell in love with. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I can change. Elena's voice trembled. I know you want to. Daniel stepped toward her. Then stay. Please. We can go to therapy. We can start over. Elena shook her head slowly, tears falling. I've already stayed through every promise. Silence filled the apartment. The kind of silence that ends a life chapter. Daniel's gaze shifted to Silas, anger flaring again. This is your fault. Silas met his eyes calmly. No, he said quietly. It is the consequence of your choices. Daniel looked like he wanted to scream. But he didn't. Because somewhere deep down he knew it was true. Elena walked past him. The door opened. And the life she had survived finally closed behind her. The night air felt colder outside. Or maybe it was just the shock of freedom. Elena stood on the sidewalk, suitcase beside her, staring at the empty street like she didn't know where to go next. Because leaving was only the first step. The second step was the terrifying one. What now? Silas stepped beside her, hands in his coat pockets, posture relaxed. You're shaking. I don't know what happens next, she whispered. Silas nodded once. You breathe. She let out a shaky laugh that broke halfway through. I don't have anywhere to go. You do. She looked at him, panic flickering. I can't stay with you. I don't want to owe you anything. Silas's expression softened slightly. You misunderstand. You will not stay with me. Confusion replaced fear. You will stay somewhere safe. Within minutes, a black car pulled quietly to the curb. The driver stepped out, opening the door without asking questions. Elena hesitated. Where is this taking me? A private residence owned by my company, Silas said. Staffed. Secure. Temporary. No expectations. No obligations. Her eyes widened. Why would you do this for me? Silas looked out at the city lights. Because power means nothing if it cannot protect. Elena swallowed hard. And stepped into the car. Weeks passed. The bruises faded first. The fear faded slower. Silas did not visit every day. He didn't hover. Didn't intrude. Didn't overwhelm her with attention or gifts. He checked in. He made sure she had options. A therapist. A lawyer. A financial advisor. A job transfer within the hotel to a quieter department with higher pay and fewer hours. Every door she thought was locked opened quietly. Not dramatically. Not romantically. Just steadily. And that was what made it real. Healing didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like safety. One afternoon, Elena sat in the hotel garden during her lunch break, sunlight warming her face. Silas approached slowly, hands in his pockets as if unsure whether he was welcome. He stopped a respectful distance away. You look different. She smiled faintly. I sleep now. He nodded as if that answer mattered more than any business deal he had ever closed. They sat together in silence. Comfortable silence. A rare thing for both of them. Elena spoke first. I keep waiting for the catch. Silas glanced at her. The catch. The moment you expect something in return. Silas looked thoughtful. In my experience, kindness loses its value when it becomes a transaction. Elena studied him carefully. You don't act like anyone I've ever met. A corner of his mouth lifted. I have lived longer than most. She laughed softly, assuming it was a joke. Silas did not correct her. Not yet. Time stretched between them. The garden hummed with distant city sounds. Elena looked at her hands, then back at him. You changed my life. Silas shook his head. You changed it. She frowned. You helped. I opened a door, he said quietly. You chose to walk through it. Elena felt tears sting her eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something new. Gratitude. Hope. Maybe even the beginning of love. She hesitated before asking the question that had lived quietly in her mind for weeks. Why me? Silas stared ahead at the sunlight filtering through leaves. He had asked himself that question many times. Out of billions of humans, out of centuries of existence, why her? Finally he answered honestly. Because you climbed into the bed of a monster and believed it was the safest place in the world. Elena blinked. You're not a monster. Silas's gaze shifted to her, ancient and unreadable. You don't know what I am. She held his gaze. I know what you do. Silence stretched between them. Soft, fragile, powerful. For the first time in centuries, Silas felt something he had never allowed himself to feel. Possibility. Not possession. Not obsession. Possibility. Elena smiled gently. You helped me learn something. And what is that? That kindness isn't weakness. Silas looked at her, something warm breaking through centuries of cold restraint. You taught me something as well. Her heart skipped. What? That even immortals can change. The wind rustled the garden trees. The city moved around them. And somewhere between pain and healing, between fear and safety, between human and immortal, a story began. A slow, quiet, impossible story. One built not on power, but on choice, on respect, on patience, on love that did not demand, did not control, and did not hurt. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a king can do is choose to protect instead of rule. And sometimes the bravest thing a girl can do is believe she deserves to be safe.